So thank you everyone for joining us today. And I'm so delighted to welcome you all to the sixth Swarovski Foundation in Conversation Talk. Aligned with the Swarovski Foundation values and to the Sustainable Development Goals, and with the contribution from our partners and stakeholders, each session examines, discusses, and raises awareness about some of the most pressing themes facing our environment and our society. And today we want to raise awareness about World Oceans Day, which was officially celebrated a few days ago on June 8th, but also World Oceans Month in the United States. The theme of this year's World Oceans Day is the ocean life and livelihoods. This celebration aims to highlight humanity's essential relationship to the ocean and empowers individuals, communities, and industries to create positive change. Oceans are considered to be the lungs of the planet, a critical part of the biosphere, and according to the UN, a major source of food and medicine. The ocean produces at least 50% of the planet's oxygen, and it is home to most of the Earth's biodiversity and is the main source of protein for more than 1 billion people around the world. Therefore, we as humans must create a new balance and build a connection that is inclusive, innovative, and useful for the ocean and the life inside it. So as a foundation, we share a long-lasting commitment to preserving the health and sustainability of our oceans as part of our environmental conservation efforts. We not only support Sustainable Development Goal number 15, life on land, but also 14, life below water. And we recognize how not only the terrestrial, but also the ocean conservation contributes to tackling climate change. This is especially relevant in the lead up to the UN Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development, which will run from 2021 to 2030 and aims to strengthen international cooperation to develop scientific research and innovative technologies that connect ocean science with the needs of modern society. So today we have the incredible pleasure of having two of our foundation partners join us to discuss the essential work they have led to safeguard our oceans and educate people about the main challenges facing our oceans and seas. So I'd like to invite and welcome Daniela Fernandez, CEO and founder of Sustainable Ocean Alliance, based in San Francisco, and Clare Brook, the CEO of Bluemarine Foundation, based in London. Daniela and Clare are both ocean conservation leaders, working with policymakers, young people, and local communities worldwide to tackle climate change and build a connection to the ocean that is inclusive and innovative. Daniela is an award-winning social entrepreneur, thought leader, and international speaker on ocean innovation, youth empowerment, and sustainability. She founded Sustainable Ocean Alliance at Georgetown University, and within 6 years, she built it into a global organization that is cultivating and accelerating innovative solutions to protect and sustain the health of the ocean. In 2019, Daniela was included in Forbes magazine and its 30 under 30 social entrepreneurs list. Clare Brook joined Bluemarine Foundation as CFO in 2014 and then became the CEO in March 2015. Prior to that, she was a pioneer of environmental investing, managing sustainable investment funds at Jupiter, NPI, and Henderson. She established the Sustainable Investment Division of Aviva in 2000 and co-founded WHEB Asset Management in 2008. The work of Blue and Sustainable Ocean Alliance has been a huge source of inspiration. And we are so incredibly grateful to be partnering with you. And we are so excited now to hear all about your work. So let's get started. Daniela and Clare, thank you so much for joining us today. We're so thrilled that you're here. And there's so much to talk about. I don't even know where to start, but I think it would be just wonderful if both of you could just introduce yourself. And if given the introduction, you probably would not have mentioned about yourself, you know, those tremendous accolades, but if you could give a little introduction about your organizations and tell us about the vision, the mission, and then of course, the focus areas of your very respective organizations.
Sure. Shall I go first?
Let's do London first and then San Francisco.
As I'm ahead in the time zone. Thanks so much for having me. It's thrilling to be here, and it seems to be a very exciting World Oceans Week. So much going on in terms of kind of policy announcements and so on. So Bluemarine Foundation was established in 2010, And our aim is to try and protect as much of the ocean as possible. And the imperative to do this is really this link between ocean health and climate change, which is becoming increasingly apparent. As you said, Nadja, the ocean is responsible for releasing over half the oxygen that we breathe. It's also responsible for absorbing nearly half the CO2 in the world. So in other words, it absorbs twice the CO2 that, for example, the rainforest absorbs. And yet this is little understood. People don't know exactly how it does that and to what extent. And its capacity to absorb CO2 is a function of the marine life in the ocean. And so through the fact that we're taking out vast amounts of this marine life through very kind of wasteful and unsustainable fishing practices, it's the equivalent to kind of chopping down the rainforest. So Blue is in the business of trying to put more of the ocean under protection, to restore as much of the ocean as we can, to tackle unsustainable fishing, to raise awareness of the need to connect people more to the ocean, and particularly through education programs.
Amazing.
It's amazing, Claire. And thank you again for having us, Nadja. It's so exciting to be here with everyone. Well, for me, maybe starting with my purpose. When I was 19, I had this big realization that our climate and our ocean, they were in danger, but the reality was that young people were not being included in these conversations. When you're looking at the UN level, high level meetings, all these conversations were taking place behind closed doors, and there wasn't any live stream going to young people. There wasn't any opportunity for them to get involved. So I realized that if we are going to solve these very pressing challenges, we need that next generation. We need their ingenuity. We need their passion, their frustrations. We need to hear them out. And so I realized that there was a platform that was missing from this space. And my second realization also was the fact that when you're attending these high-level meetings, you're hearing about the problems. So you're hearing about the depressing statistics of how we're going to have more plastic than fish by weight in the ocean soon, how our coral reefs are dying, how climate change is impacting the acidification of our ocean. But you don't hear about hope. You don't hear about solutions. You don't hear about innovation. And so I set out to build a platform where I could not only empower young people and activate them, but more importantly, that I can help them create solutions through entrepreneurship, through ocean technology. And so I graduated from Georgetown in 2017, moved to Silicon Valley because I wanted to take that innovation spirit, that human capital that existed in putting forth new software companies, and instead translate that into the ocean space. So at SOA, we have two pillars. We support young people and their projects. We give them access to education, resources, financing to make their ideas come to life. And then we also support ocean technology companies, whether it be autonomous vessels that are collecting ocean data, or wave energy companies, all the way to new materials to replace plastic. And so that's the momentum we've built so far, in just changing the narrative of let's not only be victims to the space, but let's be change agents, and let's roll up our sleeves and be the inventors we need the world, the world needs us to be.
That's fantastic. So maybe the two of you can talk about something we just heard about earlier, FAD. And how the modern technology could potentially also help and support. But we'll get to that in a moment, but that sounds incredible. So your target audience is the younger generation, and educating them to really implementing. What about you, Claire? Who is your target audience? And is it you implementing things, or is it you working through other communities?
Yeah, I mean, we're also really keen to engage with younger people, obviously, because they're the future. And I guess what we're trying to do is both target policymakers and people working on the ground in any given community, and you need this sort of combination to bring about change. But I was interested in what Daniela was saying about reaching younger people, because we have this project in the Maldives, and in the Maldives, a lot of girls in particular don't know how to swim. And so we did this one project where we gave these girls the sort of goggles so that they could look under the water. We just took them out so they were sort of waist deep in the water, and then encouraged them to look down at a little reef that was there. And they were able to see under the ocean for the first time in their lives. And they came up with these sort of amazed expressions on their faces. So I think kind of teaching people more about the sort of wonders within the ocean then gives them the desire to want to protect it.
Yeah, exactly. I can just imagine. And Daniela, do you have any way of like bringing the children also in contact with the ocean?
In the past, we actually hosted expeditions for our entrepreneurs and our young leaders to go out and actually see what they were working towards protecting. We actually did an accelerator at sea in Alaska in partnership with Lindblad Expeditions, and that was in 2019. And it was just the most surreal experience of, you know, when you're an entrepreneur and you're working so hard in an office, head down, building your product, you sometimes lose sight as to your reason. And so we went out to Alaska, and one of the memories that I have is that we were there near the glacier, and the glacier just, you know, fell in front of our eyes. And so that was just such a reality and a shock to all of us, because we realized the urgency of the situation. And so I believe that all of those entrepreneurs went back and just, you know, were more passionate and more determined to do the work that brought them there. And so that's what we try to do. Obviously now with the pandemic, it's a little harder to convene people, but in the future, we'll hopefully bring more of our young leaders into conferences. One thing that we also did is we partnered with the European Union to co-host the Our Ocean Conference. We partnered with the Indonesian government to co-host their Our Ocean Conference. So the idea there was to, once again, to invite young people to be part of these conversations and to get them in the door. Because otherwise you don't have that accessibility ever as a young person. And so that's our role.
Yeah, I think that's so nice. But Claire, I think you also have, you encourage the youth to be heard and to, you know, be able to put their opinion and thoughts forth. How do you interact with them, and what's your advice?
Yeah, well, my theory is that politicians are increasingly kind of susceptible to listening to young people, you know, potential voters of the future, I guess, to put it cynically. So we're really keen through our education programs, you know, first of all, you sort of inform young people, but then obviously they want to know what they can do. Well, there's things you can do on a personal level in terms of your own lifestyle, but you can also reach out and actually contact politicians, you know, your own MP, or even, you know, take it right to the top or whatever, you know, right to the president, right to the prime minister, and say, you know, my name is so-and-so, I am 14 or whatever you are, and I care passionately about the future of the ocean, which I recognize is crucial to being able to mitigate the worst effects of climate change. Please, can you ensure that your government takes this issue seriously and does as much as possible to protect the ocean and to tackle the problem of overfishing? And, you know, if lots of people started writing letters like that to politicians, I think we might be able to see a sort of faster pace of change, because at the moment, I think governments don't think that the general public cares enough.
Or has the information to feedback. And I think that's amazing how you both empower that younger generation to formulate an opinion, and then also be able to communicate what it is outward and upward. So I think it's fantastic. And just in terms of carbon, you know, it was such an, as you were saying, Claire, at the very beginning, such an important topic, or 50% of the carbon is also kind of circulated throughout the ocean. Can you talk to us a little bit about the new project, the Blue Project?
Well, so yesterday we had a Blue Carbon conference, and I think a lot of projects are going to stem from that, but it becomes increasingly clear that the link between biodiversity in the ocean and carbon sequestration is incredibly close. And it would appear that ocean-based actions, i.e. if we were to protect 30% of the ocean, which is what Blue wants to see done, and the rest managed sustainably, that could deliver a fifth of all the mitigation we need to keep global temperature rises within 1.5 degrees, i.e. it's the equivalent to shutting down every coal-fired power station in the world. So, these nature-based solutions are kind of there for the taking. So we're really interested in driving that forward, and there are all sorts of kind of subsets of that. In a way, we could call for a ban of bottom trawling, because every time we have these vast vessels that scrape the bottom of the ocean floor, you're releasing a lot of stored carbon and stored methane, which is 80 times more potent a greenhouse gas than carbon. So there's a lot of different projects that Blue is going after on the blue carbon front.
Mm-hmm. That's so interesting. Does that also tie in with the United Nations Decade of Ocean Science and Sustainable Development? Is that a topic there?
Well, I think, not enough is the answer. Particularly in the run up to COP26 in Glasgow, we're trying to get it more sort of front and center in discussions around climate change, that the ocean and ocean protection plays a huge part, or has a huge part to play in the fight against climate change. Mm. So that's a big struggle for us to try and get it moved up the policy agenda.
Mm-hmm. And what about you, Daniela? Do you have any focus at all on carbon?
We absolutely do. I mean, like Claire, we believe that it is the number one need to address, because if our climate goes, our ocean goes, and so do we as humanity. And to give you some examples, we have our microgrant project. So we give young leaders access from $1,000 to $10,000 to go forth and bring their idea to life. And many of these projects are those nature-based solutions that Claire was speaking about. We have young people planting mangrove forests. We have them, developing new seagrass farms. We have them restoring coral reefs. And what's so important about them doing it is the fact that they're the ones that are living in these communities. Mm-hmm. They know the information. They are experiencing climate change firsthand. And so for us to come in as an NGO and say, this is how we want it done, it's not correct. We have to ask them, what is your solution? What is your project? What is your take? And then empower them by funding them, by giving them access to mentorship and education to get them to then, build these projects. So that's something that we're doing actively to contribute to the Blue Carbon Initiative. And then also on the entrepreneurship side, we are funding companies and supporting ocean technology startups that are working to remove fossil fuels, whether it is by, the company I mentioned earlier, CalWave companies. They are, imagine a buoy system that captures the wave energies and they translate that energy into electricity. So if they can get to scale, we can power islands and maybe even nations on wave energy, as opposed to having dependence on fossil fuels. So thinking on both sides of the coin, from not only the removal of carbon, but also the prevention of carbon entering our atmosphere, is something that we're addressing through technology innovation and also youth empowerment.
Mm-hmm. That's fantastic. Amazing. It makes you think the sky is the limit, not just the sky, but the ocean. It's fantastic, really. And innovation engineering is certainly the solution finder. Now, could you both comment also on the topic of plastic in the ocean? And, I feel sometimes there's a stigma. There's perhaps also a misunderstanding what it really means to have plastic in the ocean, where that comes from, and how it can be prevented from getting there. So I know you both have some very interesting data to share.
Well, Bluemarine's take on plastic is that, a lot of people are doing great work on trying to prevent plastic from entering the ocean from the waste stream. We're more focused on plastic that enters the ocean through the fishing process, because in terms of kind of threats to marine life, although plastic that we humans produce looks foul and is particularly sort of distressing when you're swimming somewhere quite remote and you see a lot of plastic washed up on the beaches, but it's not actually such a huge threat to marine life, although when it breaks down into microplastics and enters the food chain, it can be pretty ghastly. Whereas discarded fishing gear, I think, is around 10% of all the plastic in the ocean, which is already extraordinarily huge. You think of plastic in the ocean as being sort of bottles and straws and bags, but actually a huge amount of it, 10%, is discarded fishing gear. But that 10% kills 4 times the marine life than the other 90% of plastic kills, because obviously it's designed for the purpose. And you have these horrific kind of huge nets, these fishing aggregation devices, as you mentioned earlier, Nadja, and but also just any piece of fishing gear has the potential to catch loads and loads of fish and other marine life, turtles and so on. Eventually it gets so full that it sinks to the bottom. These poor creatures then rot. The net then rises to the surface, and because it's made of plastic, so it's very durable, it starts the whole morbid process all over again. So finding ways of no longer having the problem of ghost gear, as it's called, and incentivizing people to kind of take it out of the sea is one of Blue's kind of priorities.
And aren't the companies responsible for discarding it? The companies who have put them there in the first place, or where is their sense of accountability?
Well, not enough is the answer. I don't think it's necessarily ever pinned on a particular company. It would be the responsibility of the fishing vessel, and that might not have any particular accountability, and it's very hard to trace, to work out whose it was. So one thing we've been trying to do is actually find ways of kind of putting a marker on the gear so that it can be retrieved by the fishermen who would normally want it back, and then also can be avoided so that it doesn't get towed away.
That's so sad, really, I have to say. Do you encounter anything like that, Daniela?
Absolutely. And Claire, I was just about to mention, I should introduce you to one of our entrepreneurs. They're actually doing exactly that. They're called Blue Ocean Gear, and they have found a way to build out these IoT devices and these tracking mechanisms, and they are attaching them to fishing nets to tackle that exact problem in terms of, discarding fishing nets and bringing them back. So definitely excited to, make that connection for you. And
that'd be brilliant. Thank you.
Of course. No, and from our perspective, when we look at the plastic space, and that's something that actually we partner with your foundation, and we're so thankful for your support. And that one, we hosted a series of webinars called Unmasking Plastic. And that was focused on just bringing more education to our younger population as not only what is a problem, but what are the solutions? How can we tackle this problem from the policy perspective, from the corporate perspective, as entrepreneurs? And so we hosted a series of webinars to get them more informed. And then we also support river cleanups. Most people don't know this, but actually a lot of the source of plastic comes from rivers, and that ends up in the ocean space. So if we can tackle those communities that are surrounded by rivers and that don't have that infrastructure built out because of their countries or because of their regions, we can make a difference there in empowering young people to help them build those regional infrastructures, to talk to their government about how to make it happen, and of course just clean up the actual trash and to get that out of the waterways, because then it becomes cultural. Once you have a young person out there advocating for it, talking to their parents, talking to their the villages, talking to little kids about the importance of recycling, the importance of throwing out garbage in the right bins, that's when we have real change start to happen. And so that's something that we did in terms of river cleanups and also in terms of education. And then, like I mentioned, we also have entrepreneurs that are working on, like I mentioned, Blue Ocean Gear. We have a company that is working on creating a new type of styrofoam. You may know that styrofoam is a product that doesn't doesn't ever disintegrate. It just lives on forever. So this company is called Cruise Foam, and they found a way to take shrimp shells and discarded shrimp shells with chitin in it and make it into a styrofoam-like material. And that disintegrates in the ocean easily and can even be a food source for different, animals. Same thing with a company called Lollyware. And Lollyware is they're creating straws out of seaweed. Same idea, something that can actually be supportive to our ocean instead of harming it. And then with Lollyware, not only are they replacing the plastic problem, but they're also growing their own seaweed, and they're creating more, of that ability to absorb carbon. So when we look at these companies, we're seeing that they're tackling multiple oceanic problems from the perspective of carbon removal and also from the perspective of pollution.
Yeah, that's so incredible. Super.
It's brilliant, isn't it? We've got, all the technology around to actually be able to solve these huge problems. It's just a question of kind of mobilizing it.
That's so true. However, speaking of shrimp, I would like to ask you both now the question really about the fishing in particular. I think it would be really amazing, Claire, if you could just elaborate a little bit on the different types of fishing out there and the impact of those different types of fishing. We all take it for granted. We buy our food from either the local fishmonger or the supermarket. I think the younger generation is probably a lot better at looking at the origin, but the older generation doesn't. It would be just super to hear from you, what those different types are and what to look out for. And
yeah, sure. It's, for those of you out there who are vegans, you're definitely doing the right thing, because it is a bit of a minefield, really, trying to find genuinely sustainable fish. And the film Seaspiracy did a great job of exposing the fact that, so-called sustainable fish is often not sustainable. Broadly speaking, anything that's being kind of caught at huge scale by these vast kind of factory vessels is, likely not sustainable, whatever it's labeled as. So if you're able to source locally caught, kind of artisanally caught fish, and that the fish is more of a treat than something that is just, eaten daily that comes out of a can, then so much the better, really. So avoid anything that is caught via bottom trawling, because, as I was saying, that releases a huge amount of stored carbon. It's also very indiscriminate. Avoid things that are caught through, vast fish aggregation devices or on long lines or any of these kind of industrial scale methods. Not only is it terrible for the marine environment in terms of just the amount of creatures that are taken out of the ocean, plundered from the ocean, but the people who work on those vessels often work under appalling conditions. And so you're, often supporting kind of human rights abuses as well as abuse of the planet. So unfortunately, some of the most kind of popular fish to consume, like tuna and shrimp, are some of the most damaging in terms of the methods used to catch them. When we eat shrimp, it's often from farms where the farm has replaced mangroves. And so because mangroves absorb 35 times more CO2 than terrestrial forests, when we eat shrimp, we're basically kind of, the carbon footprint of that is really appalling. So either don't eat fish or eat artisanally sourced fish.
And how can you as a consumer know, though, if it was bottom trolling, FAD, long lines, how can,
Yeah, it's really hard to know.
Are there certificates, if it's done?
Yeah, unfortunately, the certification out there is not very trustworthy. So it's best to, your fishmonger should know. If you shop in a smaller shop and ask them through what methods was this fish caught, they may be helpful on that. Yeah. But yeah, it's unfortunately really hard to navigate your way around this. I find myself in the supermarket in all sorts of dilemmas, and drive my family mad by saying, oh no, we can't have that, no, that's terrible, no, that's really awful. So
vegan or just nothing, water.
Yeah, exactly.
No, it's such a dilemma. And no, I just wanted to hear quickly what Daniela's point on that is before I ask you then about Seaspiracy and how truthful their depiction of all these topics are. But what's your, what can you share with us just about fishing? The fishing industry.
Absolutely. Happy to chime in. Well, one of the apps that has been really helpful is a seafood watch app that the Monterey Bay Aquarium has put together. So I would encourage people to check that out. They have a pretty comprehensive just list of sustainable fish to think, and just helps a consumer think a little bit more about their choices. So going back to the importance of transparency, the importance of really understanding where the fish are coming from. One of our companies is called Trade Moto. And what Trade Moto is doing is, imagine the Yelp for fishing. So they built this platform online where the user, a business that is going out to buy fish, can go and look as to where they're sourcing their fish from, and see from different stakeholders, whether it is the people working there or the people that have bought the fish, how sustainable the fish practice is. And so now we're able to crowdsource an understanding of the sustainability practices of a company, as opposed to letting this company just tell the world how sustainable they are on their own terms. So really thinking about ways to disrupt this industry is really important. And we have seen innovations there from, the transparency side of things. Other examples I'll give is one of our companies called Safety Net Technologies. They actually devised this electromechanical machine, imagining a flashlight, and they're attaching these lights onto fishing nets because they realized that fish see light differently. So by changing the wavelength of this light, they can either attract fish towards the net or scare them away if they're turtles or dolphins or whatever the case may be. So again, just like really understanding how can we bring, these technologies to, and that enables them to decrease bycatch, which is the catch of the wrong fish, by 80%, which is so unbelievable when you're talking to fishermen. So thinking about these options out there are really important. And then on the other hand, going back to the work our youth leaders are doing, they're helping fishermen understand what sustainability is. And many times, we're having these very macro level conversations, but that doesn't reach the fishermen. That doesn't reach the people that are, in the water day to day, just trying to make a living out of fishing and bringing food back to their homes. And so our young leaders are out there speaking their language, talking to them as, as a regional neighbors, and telling them this is what sustainability means. This is how you can fish more sustainably. So again, going from the perspective of innovation is really important because we need those alternatives, but also going from the perspective of empowering grassroots leaders to go out and have these hard conversations, because it will be better received from that audience.
That's amazing.
I think that's so true, Daniela. That's something that actually Swarovski have helped us do in the Aeolian Islands, north of Sicily, where we have a project which is about educating not just kind of local children, but also working with the local fishermen to really encourage these artisanal methods and, kind of delight more in the beautiful, but unfortunately very threatened local marine environment in the Aeolian Islands.
It's amazing. I have to say, all of your initiatives are so amazing and so targeted and so positively impactful. And now just very quickly to the Seaspiracy movie, do you feel that was a good insight into what's going on? Was it correct, factually correct? And shall we be inspired from what we've seen there? And what actions can we take as individuals? And what else can you recommend in terms of, besides just doing everyone here doing a super deep dive on your websites and your reports, which are amazing and so inspirational, but what information can one share out there to really ignite and motivate that change?
So Seaspiracy, I know it's been very controversial, partly because of the kind of final message, just stop eating fish, which was maybe a little draconian. But as far as we found it at Bluemarine Foundation, we thought it was really quite an impressive film, and it did the job that we've been trying to do for a long time, which is to convince the world that overfishing is one of the most serious problems we face. So, hats off to them, really. Our organization was founded off the back of a film called The End of the Line, which actually Seaspiracy used some of the graphics from that film, the long lines going around the world, the jet engines fitting into the enormous nets and so on. So, it's good that these kind of facts and issues are being resurfaced. Mm-hmm. So I thought from that point of view, it did a great job of kind of, raising awareness of the issue, and then people can kind of argue the toss around certain statistics. Mm-hmm. Fine, we've started a debate.
Yeah, great.
From my perspective, after watching the film, what was very present for me is the fact that 3.1 billion people on this planet depend on fish as a primary source of protein. Wow. So the message that was being sent might apply to a subset of the population, those that have the option of becoming vegan, of having that lifestyle. But the reality is that 3.1 billion people cannot simply stop eating fish. It's not their choice. So in thinking about the message that was sent, if it was targeted towards, one population that can make the choice, fine. And it's great that awareness was raised. But at the same time, I think that we need to continue the conversation about sustainability, because fishing is not going to away. The industry is not going to, evaporate over the next few years. That's not the reality. So how can we, instead of simply making it seem like it's something that we should just ban altogether, think about more sustainable methods, and how can we get more transparency into those space? How can we get more people to care? So I agree with Claire. I think that the movie did a great job in just even having a conversation about this and getting more people excited. And maybe there's more vegans out there, which is great. I'm vegan myself, so I can definitely attest to what it means to living by your values. But I do have to just bring up the point that it's not realistic for everyone to stop eating fish. Mm-hmm. So we should be more practical as to what methods we utilize in making these changes happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think one of the most powerful images in the film was when they were off the coast of Africa, and there were the two guys in the boat just kind of gesturing towards their mouths and saying, basically, you are taking the fish from our mouths. If you look at aerial satellite photographs of the west coast of Africa, there's this incredible kind of concentration of industrial scale fishing vessels all the way down the coast, and it's displacing the fishing that was being done by these coastal communities. So the 3 billion people or 1 billion people who rely on fish as their main source of protein are increasingly unable to access that protein. It's having horrible consequences in that they're having to turn to, other ways of finding protein, either pushing them into eating foods that have been linked to causing pandemics, turning to piracy, and so on. So, the consequences of overfishing are very widespread. And I think we just need to kind of slightly clarify in our minds the difference between small-scale, community-based subsistence fishing that is sustainable, that's done in line with nature, and vast-scale sort of profit-driven industrial-scale fishing. And that's how we need. I think the film sort of started to make that clear, but maybe kind of slightly came unstuck.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No, it's hard to document all those facts, Well,
it's hugely complex for sure. Yeah. I saw a very interesting question in the chat about neonicotinoids, and I think it raises a very interesting question about agricultural practices on land, mm-hmm. and the kind of impact that's having in the ocean in terms of kind of agricultural runoff and the creation of these dead zones, which is really, really ghastly, where the ocean has become deoxygenized. And one of the things that Bluemarine Foundation is trying to do is restore habitats and also species. And we've got a big project on the south of England where we're restoring oyster beds, because oysters perform this fantastic function of locking up nitrates, which is, you know, a product of agricultural runoff and sewage, and doesn't make you want to eat them very much, and that's not the purpose of these oysters that we restore there. But we're restoring tens of thousands of oysters, and they're able to filter billions of liters of water every year. So that's, you know, kind of one answer to this very interesting question that's been posed.
Yeah, exactly.
We also have a company, startup called Microterra, and what they've done is they've developed a biotech solution that actually cleans that wastewater and extracts some microalgae that can then be fed back into the system to provide as animal feed for fish. So it's a really also interesting way of being able to clean and making it a circular economy within the farms.
That's incredible. Fantastic. And is that already implemented and active?
That is, they're based out of Mexico, and they're now looking to onboard more clients. So they have, you know, their work to cut out for them, but now there's also so many more agriculture farms out there. So they're definitely looking for customers.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Fantastic. Now, and another element that was very fascinating in that movie, Seaspiracy, and Clare, you touched upon it, is just the human slavery that's involved in the entire fishing industry, which I personally was not aware of at all. How do you think we can combat that, or how can one fix that? Is it a matter of the local governments? Is it the responsibility of the consumer to check the supply chain?
Well, yes, gosh, it's a very complex issue. I wouldn't say it's the entire fishing industry, but it's definitely, you know, a problem in the fishing industry that these vast vessels use labor that, you know, people are really working under horrible conditions. And I really recommend people read a book by somebody called Ian Urbina called Outlaw Ocean, which draws attention to these issues. And so you have people who are kept on these vessels for years, and they're not able to, you know, go back and see their families. They're working under horrible conditions, kind of near slave conditions. And so what we're calling for at Bluemarine Foundation is, you know, kind of really an exposure of these practices, and that all the regional fishery management organizations, which are kind of responsible for governance of the oceans, put in place rules that say that you have to go back to port. You can't just kind of stay out at sea for years. You can't maltreat these people. You have to have observers on board. You have to have electronic monitoring, 100% monitoring through kind of closed circuit television type systems, so that everything can be seen, what goes on board these vessels. You know, there've been some horrific examples of observers being murdered effectively, you know, because of what they've seen. They're not able to communicate except via the ship's communication system. So yeah, there are terrible practices. We need to kind of raise awareness of them. And then I think if we have this combination of factors in the industrial deep sea fishing industry of human rights abuses and the fact that overfishing is ultimately causing climate change, you know, I hope that soon people will wake up to the fact that it's just got to stop.
Yeah, absolutely. Daniela, what's your take on the labor involvement?
Oh, it's absolutely horrific, and it's heartbreaking to feel helpless, to feel as if, what can you do as an individual? And, you know, where I was turned back to is, how can we get this transparency and technology, right back to Claire's point of making it more digital, making it more accessible for people to really see what's happening, and also for governments to take accountability that if this is happening within, the ships porting in their docks, that they need to find a way to make it safer. They need to find a way to make it more inclusive of getting, people safe and hearing these people, because many people, as we saw in the film, are even afraid to speak up because they don't know what's going to happen to them. So providing more of these, security mechanisms and safety nets for people to feel comfortable in speaking up, and then just doing whatever we can to really look for those sustainable fishing, humane companies that are doing good, because the more we can vote with our dollars and support those companies that are doing good, the more that other companies, will be likely, change agents in becoming a better company or product. So that's what I would say in terms of what can we do as an individual consumer.
Mm-hmm. And then in terms of funds, I have to say the work that both of your organizations do is just phenomenal. How do you raise funds, and how do you, because in a certain sense, you're doing the job of the government, but you're these wonderful NGOs. How do you raise funds? How, can one get involved with the general public to raise funds for your amazing work?
We at Blue tend not to raise funds from the general public. We go more to trusts and foundations like yours, and to high net worth individuals. And we have sporting events that we run. I suppose they do raise money from the general public. But the idea is that we try and get, corporate backers or trusts and foundations to support us, and then channel that money into our projects.
And why wouldn't you go to the general public?
Well, in a sense, it's driven by the Robin Hood principle. We'd rather take money from the people who can really afford it to support the poor oceans.
No, I can see that, absolutely. But I can also see a child who's contributed £1,
Oh, we definitely wouldn't say no. And when children do sometimes raise money for Blue, and we're so incredibly touched when that happens, and we get the most fantastic letters from people who've done something really brave or brilliant, and have raised, for them a very significant amount of money. And we find that immensely moving. So I'm not saying that we wouldn't accept money. It's kind of how we target our incredibly limited fundraising resources, because we're a rather mean organization. We try and spend as much money as possible on our projects, and not very much money on fundraising or our office premises or whatever.
Absolutely. Great. Daniela.
And for us, I just have to say that as a startup nonprofit, given the fact that I founded this as a college freshman, and the fact that we're fairly new in this space, it's been extremely hard to find that funding, and because we don't have, at least before when I started this, the credibility. We weren't around for such a long time, so that's been very challenging. And it's so heartwarming to find individuals like you, Nadja, and your foundation, and high net worth individuals that just believe in me, and believe in the cause, and believe in this theory of change that we have at SOA, which is not something that you see in many other organizations or entities, and that we really believe in how can we get young people in innovation and technology. So that's been a very big challenge for us. But now we are seeing more foundations supporting us. We do take funding from individuals, so anyone can go to our website and just donate. Hopefully down the line, once we have more young leaders and they go about their professional lives, and they graduate and become entrepreneurs, they can give back to SOA. So we are absolutely looking for those investments. And then the other thing I'll mention is we launched a venture fund recently. which is a for-profit venture fund. So we can support these entrepreneurs and technologies with larger checks. So we're also raising private capital from investors that may have an interest in investing in the ocean tech space, but are not familiar with it. They don't know about it. So they invest in our fund, and then we go and choose those entrepreneurs, those companies that are making the highest impact and that have the potential for return, and we invest in those companies. So we have been now raising for-profit dollars for the fund, and also nonprofit dollars for the nonprofit to do the work that we're doing at SOA.
That's great. You know, it's so resourceful. Both of you are so solution driven, and you know, it's certainly changing the paradigm.
I think you've got to be solution driven, because otherwise, you know, you lie awake at night, or I do, worrying about climate change and other environmental problems. And unless you spend every hour of every day kind of doing something about it, you know, I think I would, you know, risk feeling a certain amount of despair.
No, but I have to say it's such a great, you know, great example. And in particular, you know, Daniela, the technologies that you are exploring, I mean, where do these innovators come from? Do they come from certain universities? Are they straight out of high school? Where are the new critical thinkers coming from?
So our presence is global. We have young people coming from 165 countries. So we definitely have a pulse on wherever an innovator is, we'll find them. And the reality is that they come from either, you know, being a PhD student that has this white paper and they found a new idea, and we help them conceptualize that into a business plan, or it's a young person that has come through our network and that, you know, has been driven by the idea of someday becoming an ocean technology entrepreneur, and they go through the journey, they learn, they look for solutions, they look for ideas, and then we help them in that process. Or they're entrepreneurs that, you know, have already maybe launched one business and are moving into a different business and want to do something for the ocean. So we are seeing them from all walks of life, which is what is really exciting to me. It's that it's not one source of just, you know, universities or education, but there are so many people out there that want to make this their livelihoods. They want to work for the ocean. They want to, you know, use their skill sets, whether it is finance or design or logistics, and apply to something that's positive. And that's the message that we're putting forward: is you can make a difference, you know, with your own mindset and your own skill set. So the way that we do that is just to channel people into our network through our entrepreneurship program or our leadership program.
That's amazing. Driven by passion, you know, that's inevitably success, you know. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. I would love to see if we have any questions. Here we go. So one question from the audience was, what kind of solutions do you have in place to battle the issues of pesticides, which we already answered. But I think maybe just in a quick summary to the audience, what is it you know, in a few bullet points, what can everyone do as an individual to raise awareness, but also have a positive impact on this very crucial issue?
Well, I think the most powerful thing any individual can do, I mean, obviously, as Daniela was saying, you know, we can kind of vote with our own dollars. You know, we can be careful about the type of fish we buy. We can avoid using single-use plastic. We can try and, you know, mitigate our own climate change impacts. But we're just, you know, one little person, if you like. In order to sort of amplify the effect of your voice, I would suggest contacting your politician and pressing for legislative change, because I think that the pace of legislative change in the ocean is still, you know, kind of decades behind where we are with terrestrial environmental protection. The sort of things that are going on at sea in terms of, you know, over exploitation of natural resources and indeed exploitation of human resources is kind of, you know, the century before last in the land-based equivalent. So I would, you know, kind of educate yourself a little bit if you need to. I think everyone is actually incredibly well informed, and then raise these issues with politicians and get them seen through into legislation.
Mm-hmm. Great.
And what I would say is I would encourage people to have a mentality shift from this problem is the government's problem or the corporation's problem and they're the bad agents to really taking responsibility for this problem. When I was 12 years old and I watched Al Gore's movie An Inconvenient Truth, that was my reality. I knew that this was my problem and I did everything in my power to, to bring solar panels to my high school back then, or, to now start SOA. So I really think that every individual should change their mindset and ask themselves, what can my contribution be? How can I be a part of this movement? Because it really is a movement. We're going into a space where sustainability is going to be the new norm. And so how can we disrupt every single industry that is currently harming our planet and instead make it so that it's working in harmony with our planet and with people? So thinking really about like, what can your contribution be? How can you back an entrepreneur? How can you support, with your funding, with your network, with your ideas in this space is something that I would encourage everyone to do.
That's great. Well, I'm so inspired, ready to go out and, have that impact. So thank you so much for sharing your time with us and your knowledge and your insight. And I just really want to commend you again for your amazing work to making this world a better place. And hopefully we can gather again in 5 years and look back and say, my gosh, look at the impact and look at things improved.
That would be amazing. And thanks to you as well for believing in us and for your foundation's support. If it weren't for folks like you, we would not be able to do this work. So thank you, Nadja.
Well, we all believe it, and we are such fans. And I have to say, the trustees are amazing. They're so knowledgeable. They really, we select very carefully. So we're incredibly appreciative of you all here. So.
Yeah, you're a model to many other organizations. So thank you very much for your support.
Well, thank you for your amazing work. So I look forward to seeing you both in real life one of these days. But in the meantime, we'll stay connected this way. And really, we send you our best regards. And thank you so much for your contribution today.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks for having us.
Soon. Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.